The marketplace was alive with color and noise. A maze of stalls built from metal scraps and alien fabrics that shimmered under the pale light of the twin suns. Merchants shouted in strange tongues, the smell of burning oils mixed with spices, and the air hummed with the sound of engines and strange musical tones. Leela moved carefully through the crowd, her human features standing out among the taller, sharper forms of the locals. She was not a tourist. She wore the black and silver coat of a human diplomat, the collar high, the seal of the Terran embassy stitched onto her shoulder. In her right hand, she carried a slim metal case, locked and sealed, the kind only high-level envoys were allowed to handle. She kept her gaze steady, trying to ignore the way eyes followed her, some with curiosity, some with open dislike. This was supposed to be a routine negotiation. She had been told the Alien Council wanted peace. She had been told she would be safe here. She turned down a narrow path between two tall stalls of red cloth, and that was when the crowd began to change. The noise quieted, just enough for her to notice. A few merchants pulled their wares back. From the front of their tables, conversations stopped mid-sentence. She felt it before she saw it, the shift in the air, the way people made space. 3 figures stepped into view ahead of her. Alien soldiers. Their armor was black and ridged like the shell of some deep-sea creature, their helmets shaped with narrow slits glowing faint green. Each carried a long, staff-like weapon, humming faintly with energy. They stood shoulder to shoulder, blocking her way. Lila slowed, keeping her posture calm, the case still in her hand. She knew the rules here. Show no fear. Keep your words measured. She opened her mouth to speak, but one soldier barked something in his language. A sharp, cutting tone. She raised her free hand slowly, palm out in a universal sign of peace. But the soldier took a step forward, pressing the tip of his staff against her chest. The hum grew louder. The crowd had gone completely still now, forming a loose ring around them. Lila could see eyes peering from behind fabric awnings and metal beams. She tried again, speaking in the alien trade tongue, telling them she had permission to pass, that she was here on orders from both councils. But the soldier in the middle tilted his head slightly and said something short to the one on his left. It was not a question, it was an order. The alien on the left moved suddenly. The strike was so fast that most in the crowd didn't even register it. A flash of light, a sharp hiss of energy, and Lila staggered. The case slipped from her grip, hitting the dusty ground with a dull thud. She looked down at her coat. A faint smoking hole had burned through the fabric just above. Her heart, her legs weakened, and she dropped to her knees. The marketplace around her seemed to fade into muffled sound, the voices distant, almost underwater. She thought of Earth then, of the ocean she used to visit as a child, the salt air and the warmth of the sun. She tried to breathe, but her chest would not obey. The soldier who struck her stepped closer and pushed her shoulder so she fell onto her back. The twin suns shone overhead, their light blinding her eyes. Somewhere in the haze she saw the alien in the middle kneel and pick up the metal case. He turned it in his claws, examining it like it was a prize. Then he stood, his helmet tilting down at her one last time. The world was dimming fast now, her vision narrowing. She heard the distant sound of boots on metal, the crackle of a nearby energy field, the faint murmur of the crowd. Her final breath was shallow, almost a whisper, and then there was nothing. Around her, the aliens began to move again, their voices returning, their hands gesturing sharply to push the crowd back. The soldier with the case walked away, not knowing that every second from this moment was already counting down. Above the marketplace, hidden far beyond sight, a signal had just been sent. And in the silence of space, something old and dangerous had begun to stir. The crowd thought it was over, but the truth was that it had only just begun. Far above the alien planet, the human stealth ship Vigil's spear drifted in the shadow of its own cloaking field, invisible to all known sensors. The crew had been in low alert mode for hours, watching the market district through long-range optics, waiting for the envoy to return to the embassy. Captain Rourke stood at the forward console, sipping cold coffee from a dented metal flask, his eyes half on the readouts and half on the dusty streets below. He had done dozens of escort runs like this. They were usually quiet, slow, and painfully boring. But then, a sharp, shrill tone pierced the bridge, a sound that froze everyone. Mid-breath was not an alarm they heard often. It was the kind of signal every human in deep space prayed never to hear. The red light flashed once on his console, then the display switched to a short coded burst. It was Lila's personal beacon. For 5 seconds it burned bright, then it went dark. The ship's navigation officer looked at him, her face pale. "Sir, it's the black code," she whispered. Rourke said nothing. He leaned forward, staring at the empty signal window, his jaw tightening. The black code had only one meaning. The diplomat was gone, and she hadn't died in an accident. Someone had ended her life. The crew waited for him to call Earth Command, to request orders, but Rourke didn't move toward the comms. Instead, he keyed in a manual override, bringing up a channel so restricted it wasn't even listed in official fleet directories. He typed 6 words. No explanations, no names, no coordinates. Just 6 words. "The hands have taken the star." The message burst from the ship's array, encrypted beyond anything the alien systems could crack, then vanished into the deep black. On the alien defense screens below, nothing changed. No alarms sounded. To their sensors, the sky was still quiet. But in truth, that tiny message was already spreading across human space, bouncing off old satellites, deep stations, and private relay nodes that no government admitted existed down in the marketplace. Alien soldiers were dragging Leela's body toward a military transport. The crowd was being pushed back with sharp commands and threatening gestures. No one noticed the faint pulse in the clouds high above them, the shimmer of energy bending around the Vigil's spear as it shifted position. Rourke stood by the forward viewport, watching the soldiers disappear into the maze of streets. He didn't clench his fists, he didn't curse. He only said one thing, so quietly his crew almost didn't hear it. "Clock starts now already. In systems far from here." People were reacting. A retired Marine on a farming moon shut down his tractor and walked inside without a word. A woman working in a remote asteroid lab turned off every light, then unlocked a black case she had sworn never to open again. A freighter pilot in the outer belt received a ping on his private console and simply changed his course without telling the port authority. These were not military orders. This was something older, something personal. And in the space between stars, it was moving fast on the bridge of the Vigil's spear. The crew kept their eyes on the planet, silent, except for the low hum of the ship's systems. The captain checked the timer on his display. 3 minutes gone, 34 to go. In a mining station deep in the belt, the drills had been roaring for 12 hours straight, chewing through rock and metal, shaking the floor with each strike. Then, without warning, a tall man in a grease-stained worksuit stepped away from the controls. He didn't tell the others why. He just powered down the machines and left. His name was Ivor Kane, though most here knew him as a quiet man who kept to himself. But far away, in the sealed archives of Earth's intelligence networks, his name appeared on a different list. It was a list no alien had ever seen, one that didn't appear in any official records. Ivor wasn't just a miner. He was one of the Shadows of Earthon, a remote research station orbiting a dying star. A woman in a white lab coat leaned over her console. Her experiment had been mid-sequence, the kind of work that required hours of precise timing, but she shut it down in seconds. The lab's assistants looked confused. She didn't explain. She opened a hidden compartment under her desk and took out a small, heavy case.
Hi.
It was locked with a pattern of faint glowing lines, the kind that could burn through flesh if touched. Incorrectly. She brushed the dust off it, her eyes cold. The last time she'd opened it, the skies over 3 alien worlds had burned on a desert world where the air was thin and red dust swept across endless plains. A figure wrapped in worn travel cloth stood alone at the edge of a canyon. His cum device chirped once. He didn't even look at it. He just turned, walked toward a battered speeder, and drove toward the horizon. The few settlers who saw him go said nothing.
Ow.
They knew him only as Joran, a man who rarely spoke. But Joran's face appeared in the same secret list as Kane and Joran. The woman in the lab. When one human died unjustly, they moved. Not because of orders, not because of law, but because they had made a promise long ago in the alien capital. Whispers began to move through the streets. No one knew why, but the air felt heavier. Some claimed to hear low vibrations under the ground, too faint to be sure. The alien governors. Aides noticed strange readings in the city's defense grid, tiny fluctuations in the energy field, as though something was touching it without setting off alarms. They sent the data to the defense chief, who dismissed it as interference from the marketplace crowd. Still, he tightened security. Unmarked patrols began to circle the embassy district. They thought it would be enough up in orbit, the vigils. Spear tracked the soldiers carrying Leela's body toward the central military compound. Captain Rourke stood at the console, the timer ticking in the corner of his vision. 7 minutes gone. 30 remain. In his mind, he pictured Kane leaving. The mines, the woman in the lab unlocking her case, Joran crossing the desert. They were all different, scattered across worlds, but they shared one rule. When the signal came, you dropped everything, because the shadows of Earth were not an army. They were the storm that came before the army, and now the storm was waking the marketplace was quieter now, though the tension clung to the air like static before a lightning strike. The alien soldiers had dragged Leela's body away, leaving only faint scorch marks on the ground where she had fallen. Merchants pretended to resume their trade, but their voices were low, their movements quick and uneasy. In the upper levels of the city, the alien governor stood by a wide window, looking down over the capital. His hands were clasped behind his back, his long eyes scanning the streets. A defense aide rushed in, clutching a datapad. "Governor, we have unusual readings on the orbital scans," he said. "Small fluctuations, not ours." The governor turned slowly, his expression unreadable. "Are they cloaked ships?" he asked. The aide hesitated. "Unknown. They're not behaving like ships. More like shadows passing through the grid." The governor's jaw tightened. "Sealed the city gates." The order went out instantly. Massive armored gates rumbled into place at every road leading into the capital. Air patrols launched from the defense spires, their engines screaming through the dusty atmosphere. Checkpoints sprang up across the city, soldiers scanning citizens and visitors with harsh efficiency. But as the security net tightened, something strange began to happen. In several parts of the city, streetlights flickered for a few seconds, then came back on. In others, market stalls reported brief power losses. The defense grid registered the disruptions, but could not trace them to any source. It was as if the city itself was holding its breath in the central military compound. The soldiers who had taken Lila's body passed the sealed diplomatic case from one to another, laughing in their harsh, clicking language. They didn't know that beyond the walls and the narrow alleys of the old district, unfamiliar shapes were beginning to appear in the shadows. Human shapes. They moved with quiet precision, slipping between doorways, crossing rooftops without a sound. No sensors tracked them. No cameras caught them. Even the alien patrols felt nothing more than a faint chill when these shapes passed nearby up above. The vigil's spear shifted its position again, still cloaked, watching as alien forces focused entirely on sealing the city. Captain Rourke studied the tactical map. Every locked gate, every checkpoint, every choke point was marked in glowing red. "They're sealing themselves in," he murmured. The navigation officer glanced at the timer. 20 minutes remain. The captain didn't smile, but there was a cold satisfaction in his eyes. He knew the aliens thought they were in control. He also knew they had just trapped themselves inside a cage they couldn't, seeing the space beyond the planet. Far past the range of alien sensors, other human ships were moving into position. They didn't broadcast signals, didn't make a sound. They simply drifted into the kind of orbit that could become a strike in seconds. Down in the city, a light rain began to fall, dotting the metal streets. It softened the sound of boots, and engines muffled the noises of the market. Somewhere far below, in the depths of the undercity, a hum started, low, steady, and growing. Most dismissed it as the rumble of old machinery. They didn't realize it was the sound of something Far older and far more dangerous coming away. The governor turned back to his window. He couldn't see them yet, but they were already there. Long after the human ships vanished into the clouds, the alien capital still felt wrong. Trolls moved in tight formations, scanning empty alleys and rooftops, searching for people who weren't there. The defense grid engineers worked without sleep, trying to explain how every weapon, every cum line, every power source had failed at the exact same time. No one had an answer. The alien governor called an emergency meeting with his advisors, but half of them avoided his gaze. They had all felt it, that cold pressure in the air, the weight of unseen eyes watching from everywhere at once. Beyond the capital, news spread faster than the governor could contain it. Traders whispered in spaceport bars about the human, who had walked through an armed city untouched. Smugglers repeated the story in dim-lit docking bays, adding their own details. Some said the human had burned the soldiers to ash with a single word. Others claimed the humans had never left, and were still hiding among the population. Each telling made the fear grow stronger. On a neutral world far from the capital, an alien merchant passed the news to a human pilot refueling his small freighter. The pilot didn't react, didn't smile, didn't frown. He just paid for his fuel and left. But hours later, in a hidden cum relay orbiting a dead moon, a coded message was sent in the same encryption Rourke had used. The shadows weren't disbanding yet. They had one final task. In the mining belt, Ivor Kane received the ping. In the desert, Joran got the same signal. In the lab, the woman closed her glowing case and locked it again. None of them spoke about what would happen next. And across the alien networks, something had already begun, a silent pattern of disappearances. Witnesses to Leela's death, soldiers who had touched the case, officials who had ordered her path through the market. One by one, they simply vanished, and no one ever saw them again. Long after the human ships vanished into the clouds, the alien capital still felt wrong. Patrols moved in tight formations, scanning empty alleys and rooftops, searching for people who weren't there. The defense grid engineers worked without sleep, trying to explain how every weapon, every cum line, every power source had failed at the exact same time. No one had an answer. The alien governor called an emergency meeting with his advisors, but half of them avoided his gaze. They had all felt it, that cold pressure in the air, the weight of unseen eyes watching from everywhere at once, beyond the capital. News spread faster than the governor could contain it. Traders whispered in spaceport bars about the human, who had walked through an armed city untouched. Smugglers repeated the story in dim-lit docking bays. Adding their own details, some said the human had burned the soldiers to ash with a single word. Others claimed the humans had never left, and were still hiding among the population. Each telling made the fear grow stronger. On a neutral world far from the capital, an alien merchant passed the news to a human pilot refueling his small freighter. The pilot didn't react. He didn't smile, didn't frown. He just paid for his fuel and left. But hours later, in a hidden cum relay orbiting a dead moon, a coded message was sent in the same encryption Rourke had used. The shadows weren't disbanding yet. They had one final task. In the mining belt, Ivor Kane received the ping. In the desert, Joran got the same signal. In the lab, the woman closed her glowing case and locked it again. None of them spoke about what would happen next. But across the alien networks, something had already begun, a silent pattern of disappearances. Witnesses to Leela's death, soldiers who had touched the case, officials who had ordered her path through the market. One by one, they simply vanished, and no one ever saw them again. Months later, the alien capital looked the same on the surface, streets busy, markets loud, defense patrols on schedule, but the noise was thinner, more forced. Conversation stopped whenever a human walked past. Markets fell silent at the sight of a Terran coat. Children whispered warnings about the 37-minute people, stories that spread through schools like ghost tales. In the governor's private chambers, a package arrived with no sender listed. Inside was the same small blue stone from the diplomatic case, now dark and lifeless. There was also a note, written in perfect alien script. For every one of us you take, you have 37 minutes to prepare. The governor held it for a long time, the words heavy in his hands. He understood what they meant. There would be no next time without consequences. Far away, aboard the Vigil's spear, Captain Rourke stood at the viewport, watching the stars drift past. The shadows had gone back to their hidden lives. No one had needed to tell them to. They only moved when one of their own fell. Until then, they were invisible. But in the galaxy's quiet corners, the story of the 37 minutes had taken root, spreading into places even human ships had never been. For some, it was a warning. For others, a nightmare. But for humanity, it was a promise kept. And deep down, every alien who had heard the tale now carried the same thought. If this was what humans did for one person, what would they do for an entire world?